the saturated ground, which had been worsened because we had a pretty severe drought in the southeast.
Yo, I hear we're talking about prepping on this episode, right? I came prepared. I'm ready.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the I'm Telling God About This podcast. This week, we are going to talk about Hurricane Helene, and we're going to talk about preparedness. You know, what do we do? How do we, is there, is this
How
important?
do you prepare for your house being leveled by a mudslide with no warning?
Right.
Let's get into that.
Right. Well, what's the responsibility, to tie it in, here, if you're new to the I'm Telling God About This podcast, usually we cover, biblical response to current events. We're all up in the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age, but we're not about the spirit of the age.
Because you're using your German
right.
words. It's rubbing off on you out there.
Right? So that's what we're about here, right? So obviously the hurricane's been absolutely insane. Just the devastation, and especially now as we're starting to see a lot of the aftermath as people are getting into that area. And so we're just going to talk about what we've thought about, how what we've seen has affected maybe what we're looking at doing to be, prepared. And obviously we live in different contexts.
Did you immediately pull up a topographical map of your house and see, if I got 30 inches of rain in 24 hours, would my house be... I know, it's, but because you do, because a lot of these people, they were on hills and they were getting hit with the mudslides as a result of the saturated ground, which had been worsened because we had a pretty severe drought in the southeast.
Yo, I hear we're talking about prepping on this episode, right? I came prepared. I'm ready.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Is that
so good.
Is that real? Is that...
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Dude.
I'm here.
That's like an early G-Watt flak jacket. Looks like you got a Cold War era gas mask. What do you got going on?
Did you go to
there?
the Army surplus store to get all this stuff?
I can neither confirm nor deny where my gear has come from.
Dude, that's awesome,
hilarious. Man. Yeah, so
it's not going to help you with the flood.
But that's all right.
But the looting that comes after.
So I'm ready.
Yes.
Dude, really though, the looters, that's
gosh.
Always the... I'm surprised it even came up. Really the... ass end of North Carolina is where you want to be looting.
Yeah.
That does not seem like a good idea.
That's the scary part, is that, just like when we talk about you don't want to invade these parts of America, that's true. But it's also a really special breed of criminal out there because they grew up the same way, and they have the same baseline skills. Thank God IQ is a bell curve. So crime tends to track to the brain pores, but there's still a base level of competency that comes from growing up and having to work. If you watch, one day we're going to get our buddy Jordan Jonas on here, but when you watch Alone, I'm always looking for the guy that has lived on the streets and is like a recovering drug addict. That my money's on that guy, right? Apart from our buddy Jordo, who's deep convictions and crazy enough to go, hobo across the country and, move to Siberia. Apart from that, I'm going with, drug addict, levels of, discomfort for the win.
Crazy. Yeah. So where has it been affected? Where has it hit most? There's been a bunch of deaths, a bunch of destruction. Cities or towns that we once knew are no longer there. They're wiped out completely. I mean, it looks like Fukushima over in some of the areas.
Dude, it's
Helene
and that time forgot, man. I was looking. So I was a whitewater raft guide all through college. Every summer of college, I worked in that area. So I've run all of these rivers that were flooded and all of the surrounding areas. The businesses that I used to work for have been completely annihilated. These towns do not exist. I'm watching the news. It's really sad because I know that area incredibly well. I've spent a lot of time there, and but it's not hard to understand why. If you've ever spent time around water, I really do not think people understand how like the illusion of like humanity taming creation is hilarious to me. Like you start to understand why God chose a flood to destroy the earth. It's like you are so like you've never known powerlessness until you've been dragged down the river by 50,000
I think
gallons of water.
If I had to pick, I would want that natural disaster the least. I would rather have earthquakes, tornadoes,
for sure.
Wildfires.
There's really nothing you can do.
The most terrifying scene in a movie, like I literally can't watch it, is in the movie on it's the movie
Thailand?
Yeah, in Thailand that covers.
Yes, that movie's really good.
So I used to go to Phuket every year.
Same.
And
I've been to that beach.
Yeah, same. And the one year that my family did not go was the year that
Oh wow.
And I mean the one year that we chose not to go was the year the tsunami hit. And I remember watching, there's a scene, maybe we can cut it in here, where it's like literally the, like you see it come over. And the most terrifying thing about this is you're on vacation with your family. And this is the thing that gives me nightmares, is I'm unable to protect, like the kids are playing in the pool and the tsunami comes over the wave. And it's like, what do? You can't get to both kids. You can't get to your, like, what are you going to do? You're going to go for your kids? You're going to go for your wife?
It's a terrifying juxtaposition that, like...
Have you guys had that thought?
Or even just that...
As you hit the 3-kid mark?
Have you been...
When I watched that movie with Brittany, I was like, all right, honey, here's how it's going to go. Like, we're like problem solving,
planning.
Right? Like, so like I'm grabbing 2, you're grabbing 1, and you do everything I say and we move. Like, there can't be any...
You got to keep like a... like you have to keep up with it, so but like a point system for each kid, and then who's at the top.
Who's earned. Like, listen, I'm grabbing you first. I'm not grabbing you at all. You're on your own. No, I remember.
Go
ahead, Josh.
I would say it's like in everyday life. Like if you have more than one kid and you're getting out of the car, you take one of the kids out of the car seat. You go and you get the other kid out of the car seat. Where's that other kid going? So you're in a parking lot. He starts running behind. It's like you're in a position where you have no idea. You have to be on, and it's a terrifying thought. It's like, do I have positive control in any instance? Am I out of reach? And it's
what do
it's
you
a
do?
terrifying feeling.
In regards to that, if I may, I think that's for this conversation something. Like, we're not talking about any level of superhumanness here, but if you did go see this movie or you do go watch this movie about the tsunami or we're
talking about...
Oh, I can't remember.
I just don't think I've seen it.
Hold on.
It's really good. It's quite good. But there's a level of awareness that I think goes into this conversation that's really helpful. Back to children and response and the tsunami in Thailand, right? Like, you have to be, as a parent... moving through the world, Josh, I love your car analogy. Like, you have to be aware of multiple things at one time, and you have to have your senses up. And if you're this is a weird example, but in Lynchburg in the 80s, there was a massive amount of water that flooded the James. Houses underwater, crazy thing like that. And so it's like, anytime something is going down, my spidey senses start tingling, and I'm like, okay, let me process. Okay, where's flood possibilities coming from? Where's tree falling down possibilities coming from?
And what are the knock-on effects of all those things?
Right.
Yeah, like you start thinking about, okay, what supplies do I need? The reason I was excited about this conversation is because I think, yes, when the shit happens, you're already too late.
Yeah.
In some very real sense. Did you guys see the hospital that put up the water barricades?
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. That was
wicked cool.
So the movie was called...
the engineering of that is so cool.
So the movie was called The Impossible, by the way. So I'll tell you why I thought about that was because I remember when Lillian was born, we went up to see my wife's grandmother was dying, and we like hours, days away from death. So my daughter Lillian was 7 days old, and it was a pretty frustrating decision because it was winter and it was December, and we decided to drive up to Buffalo, New York in December.
Oh, I know where this is going.
And we were driving through Pennsylvania, and I have seen and helped rescue people out of cars and rivers. And like, I'm driving at night through the river. Oh, I think it's the Allegheny Valley or whatever it is that goes up through Pennsylvania, and it's windy. It's heavy snow, and I've got Avery 1 and change, and Lillian 7 weeks old. My wife is sleeping in the side, and I'm like, if I go into the water, what am I gonna do?
I love this. I was just thinking about this the other day.
And that was like a real like eye opener for me. And
what was your answer?
What was my answer? Is I'm
do you have a
I mean the answer was I'm gonna do the best I can. That was the answer. Like, dude, I'm gonna do the best I can. Like,
every time we drive over a bridge, Brittany freaks out and she's like, "What would happen? What would we do?" And I said, "Well, honey, first of all, let me just tell you, I'm going for the kids first, because I need you to like do you, get your seatbelt off, focus on not freaking out. And then I know this sounds like teeny tiny whatever, but I never carry a knife that doesn't have a glass breaker.
Yeah, smart.
For that reason.
Yeah.
Well, I have,
and so it's like,
I
never carry a knife that doesn't have a serrated edge, because if I need to cut a seatbelt, then it's like I can break glass and I can cut a seatbelt. And so it's like, all right, I know I'm going out the back window, because most cars, the rear goes up, and I got my car seats first. So I'm like, cut, grab them out, check on Brittany, go out the window. And it's like, I'm like problem solving.
Right, but that assumes, and that's the thing, like if you know your car and you know the situation, but like I'm just thinking about, I mean, there's the usual things like we have training for some of this stuff, like in the Army, we do rollover drills, and we do like dunk tank stuff, and like we have some experience with it, but the belt cutter thing is a real thing. Like on my kit, I have a seatbelt cutter that's located in this general vicinity, high on my chest, because of that kind of thing. I keep them in my car. We get these things issued to us all the time, so I keep one in my car and I keep it in the visor, and I keep one in my wife's car for the same reason. Belt cutters, especially if you got kids in car seats, if you think about stuff like that, like you think you're going to be messing with a 5-point harness when climbing over glass and stuff, good luck.
Guys, I'm struggling. Like seriously, as we're even talking about this, I find myself daydreaming and going and living these scenarios. And I'm like going through the steps that I would do. Is that just a man thing? I mean, if there is any women talking or watching here, like let us know in the comments. Did those things go through your mind about how you're going to do things?
I think this is a good point.
Oh my gosh.
I think that's what's funny. I think a lot of times men give women a hard time about like being anxious about like anything, like ridiculous things. Women think like, oh, you just don't care about anything. I'm like, oh no, yes I do. It's just the things that I'm anxious about or stressing about are just different things, But
that's true.
But we talk about things like those types of scenarios. Nick, I love what you said. There is a level of anxiety that, as a man, like I want to bring this to a practical, but also from a biblical standpoint, in our faith, there is a level of preparedness that comes from one exposure. Like, what are you aware is even possible? Like, I hadn't thought about how difficult it would be to get, or an order of operations in rescuing my family. When I just had my wife and I and one kid, it took having a second kid and being in a precarious situation to kind of bring to my mind the possibility of what could happen. So I love these new like TikTok and Instagram things where it's like fear unlocked scenarios, because I'm sure it's helping out a lot of people be like, oh, I didn't even think that was, possible. But it's that level of exposure, right? But at the same time, right, as we want to be alert and anxiety is healthy and it allows us to work through these things in our heads, we also have to remember that we are not like, that should not be something that robs us from like being present, from being joyful, or that prevents us from engaging in the work of the kingdom, the self-sacrificial part, the other parts, like the trusting God part. Like I love the passage like, hey, if you don't have a sword, sell a cloak and buy a sword. Like a lot of people use that to justify like Second Amendment type stuff. What I look at that as is from the word is like, hey, there are things that you should have, right? Like there's a level of like, you're responsible for what you have to do. And so you should have the tools necessary and not rely on what you got in the background there. But yeah, so I don't know. Like, how do you guys feel? What are your thoughts on that? Like,
I think I love your perspective, and I actually think, I don't know, I was so excited about this topic. Not because I'm excited that tragedy is taking place. I'm excited about talking about preparedness, about wisdom, about care for your family, and I actually think it brings me and my household more peace in that I, as the head of the household, we're not getting into gender roles in this conversation, but I like walking into my family. Next episode. I like walking into this conversation. Okay, so like, yeah, it's for me, it's a way to bring peace to my family. So like Brittany the other night, stuff was popping off in Lynchburg. 2 people, one dude, a 19-year-old, because of road rage, was this 30-something-year-old imbecile with a baby in the car, follows this 19-year-old to his driveway and shoots him and kills him. Yeah. And like Brittany is like devastated. It's a community we're fairly close with, touched a lot of people. There was another horrible car accident on the same day, so we had a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old die on the same day. Combined with that, stuff happening with the flooding, combined with that, stuff happening with Iran and Israel and Ukraine, and like it. And on top of that, the narrative is heightened. Everybody's kind of freaking out. And so she kind of comes home, and it's not like she did anything wrong, but she was just anxious. And she was like, what would we do? What's going on? What's happening in the world? What's going to happen? And I'm like, honey, look, like, we're okay. We have our home. We have our community. If for some godforsaken reason we lost power, we've had little conversations around, do we have enough rice? Do we have enough beans? Do we have enough toilet paper? Like we're not preppers, but like the basic level of necessities, so that I could say these things to her. I was like, honey, I have a plan. I've talked with, the buddies. We know where we're going to meet. Everything's fine. We're going to be safe. I have safeguards for this. And it was like 5 minutes, guys. And she was like, I
think it's so funny for you to say you're not a prepper, because you're imagining the people that you think of as preppers, and then like
fair point.
The urban pod people would look at you and be like
who's this nut job?
Nick was so excited in this. We were talking about this in the chat beforehand, and he messaged like, do you guys have go bags? And I just texted him back, I'm like, how long have you known me? Like, of course, what are you talking about? Listen, no, this is important though, because you have to think about what What do I need to be prepared for? And again, this gets back to your level of experience. So maybe this is news to you. Maybe you watch the news and maybe this is helping you understand something. Go watch the video footage of the aftermath of Helene and tell me, like, I've seen those places. Some of you, this may be the first time you've ever seen those places, so you don't know what they used to look like, but go look at before and afters.
Yeah.
It's as if nothing was ever there, apart from, like, the trash and debris in some places. Like,
yep.
The illusion that we have in our society of control and like
safety.
We, preppers talk about, like, we're, how many hours from animal, right? Like, when we had the duratio.
What's that mean?
I
don't know what that
so
means.
What it means is basically people will start eating each other after, like, basically 72 hours with no water or food access. Like, that is about how thin.
That's a scary thought.
That's how thin the layer of. Because here's what happens: the moment, like, the world relies on things moving and functioning. It's kind of like a car engine. Like, if you know how car engines work, when the engine is moving, that pulls the oil through the engine and allows it to lubricate and prevent the thing from destroying itself, right? But then when it's cold, all of the the oil pulls to the bottom. It requires the engine to move to provide that lubrication. Well, that's how.
For instance, if all the ports in America were to suddenly close, that would be like
another
fuel
contributing
pump
factor.
Or let's just say,
which would be crazy. They wouldn't all shut down at the same time. What could even cause
that?
That
would never happen.
Crazy natural disaster.
Right, but it doesn't take a lot to overload the system and prevent the things that you think are there for you It's just, or like a bank run. Your money is available if you decide to come to the bank. If you call 911 right now in a normal time, a cop's going to show up in a couple minutes. But if you call 911 when Hurricane Helene's rolling through, you're on your own.
Coming.
You're on your own.
Yeah, my wife's town where she grew up had to suspend 911 service pretty much immediately, and I'm not even sure it's back yet, just because like they don't have any resources to do anything. Like you call 911, it's like, okay, we'll maybe be able to get out there next Thursday.
Well, and we have to also keep in mind, like in these types of like you can't rely on technology either, right? Like what was it? Like all of the
can you?
Elon Musk went and
really?
Elon Musk went and said
Not unless you have
Starlink.
one of these.
So the point that I'm making is, I think we had an advantage growing up in the 80s because we know what it was like before technology. Yeah. And so I remember that because I grew up in Earthquake Central in California, and I remember in 1989 there was a big earthquake that collapsed the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. We were right there, right outside of San Francisco. It was terrifying. It was scary. There was a lot of things that were happening. And my parents made sure that they made a note, like, this is our meeting place. This is where we're going to go. If you're separated from us, this is who you talk to this neighbor. You go here. This is where we meet. So it's like without communications, everybody knows what to do. And so that's what I'm afraid of more from the technology standpoint. Everybody relies, I'm just going to pick up my cell phone and talk to whatever. You know? Also, you got to understand, like, if you have your school, like whether it be public or private school or homeschool, maybe not homeschool, I don't have to worry about it, but like private school, public school.
Yeah, how are you getting your family?
School, where's
your family at?
How are you getting your family?
How are you reconsolidating?
Right?
Exactly. So, I mean, all these things that you have to keep in mind, like there needs to be a non-technology solution to every layer. The technology
the
is the
ultimate
benefit.
non-technology solution, I think, and I thought about this because it's like, with people's homes just being like wiped out, right? Like, okay, 99% of whatever you've done to prep or whatever, that's
gone.
That's just gone now. If you don't have a local community, whether that's your church, whether that's your local, militia, which a lot of people don't know this. Most of the people who are you would think of as militias are not the way they're portrayed in movies. They're mostly like community assistance groups, and they do a lot of kind of that grassroots, assistance and charity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing, because if your house gets wiped out, you collectively, when you're part of a mesh of people who have all been doing those kinds of things, that's kind of the fallback when horrible disaster strikes you in particular.
And I know your example is so pertinent because I was, messaging in the thread the other day, hey guys, do you have go bags? One thing I've made it a goal to do is that I have everything I need in my truck to survive for a couple days off-grid, water filtration, communication devices, sleeping gear, all in the random cubbies under my seats, saws, blades, anything, extra clothes, cold gear, hot gear, whatever I would need. And so, like, why I love this conversation is because it's so multifaceted, and it doesn't have to rule your world. I completed doing that 2 years ago and forget about half the things cubbied throughout my vehicle. And if, God forbid, something happened and I had to get in my vehicle and go, I'd have to stop on the side of the road, think for a minute, go through all the cubbies and pockets and be like, okay, we're pretty all right for a bit. We can make fire, we can make shelter, we can filter water. Okay.
So a couple things. One, I love there's a couple things I want to touch on here. So one is, all right, so you think about, like Josh pointed out a couple things. We've talked about how we don't really know what to prepare for or what to risk until we're exposed to it, right? And so some of it's just the creativity of what you've seen and what you've experienced, and there's everywhere you live has its own unique things you're going to have to think about and prepare for. But there's some baseline things that you have to think of. And one of the main things to take away from this is, one is, you have to have a plan for meeting up and consolidating. Like, you have to get yourself safe first, right? So get you and your family, your immediate family, have to be safe and able to move. So like in my family, one of the rules that we have is we will always own at least one vehicle that has 4-wheel drive. One of the 2 vehicles that we own has to have 4-wheel drive. Why? Because you can't jump a median in an Accord, right? You just can't. Like, you could try, but it's not going to go well for you. As we saw, look what happened in, Helene. Like, the roads are gone. Like, they're gone. So
you're off-roading,
right? So you're gonna have to have something that can deal with that. So these kind of things are the things that are just simple things that go into. Luckily, most SUVs. I mean, we had a minivan. We got a Sienna that had all-wheel drive. Like, that was what we had at the time.
Yep.
And then the second thing is distributing your equipment. Tim made a great point. If your house gets washed away and everything that you had, like all your equipment and whatnot, is all in one place, well, guess what? That's gone. Or if you happen to be away from said house and that happens, when I'm in America, I have a rule in my for me personally, is that if I'm more than 3 hours away from my house, there's a long gun in my truck. And the reason for that is very simple. If it's 3 hours away, it's more than a day's walk. And if I've got to walk back somewhere over land, I don't want to have to be within 50 feet before I can feel like I have safety for myself.
Right.
Especially when...
Just like you use a collapsible Kel-Tex in that situation.
So maybe I had one of those in a case at some point. But yeah, it's simple things. And my wife would sometimes, she'd get frustrated by that because I'd be like, oh, where you go? Like, I come out of the house like, hey, we're going to visit her folks, and I'm putting a 12-gauge shotgun in the back of the minivan. She's like, what's that for? I'm like, are we going 3 hours away from home? She says, yep. Then I'm bringing the shotgun, or I'm bringing.
I feel like
the
that's
AR.
just the default. Who wants to be in a gridlocked traffic jam with people getting unruly and not be the most well-armed person around?
And on that note, since a lot of our listeners are in the U.S., some of you might be thinking, what kind of weapon do you bring? Like pistol. Like, I love this philosophy. Pistols exist to get you to a rifle or a shotgun. That's what they're there for. They're not a primary means of self-defense. So, I prefer for legitimate, like if I had to leave my house and grab one weapon before I left, I'm grabbing my Remington 870 12-gauge shotgun. Because
I have the same one.
I can get ammo for that anywhere. I can shoot through car doors with it. I can shoot distance. Like, it's great. We could do a whole episode on guns. We're not going to go into that. But anyway, 12-gauge shotgun, big win.
Have on Mr. Guns and Gear.
Yeah. Oh, no, it'd be great. And we should actually do that. Yeah, we'll get Mike on, and he could talk on that for forever. But then the last piece on
it's almost like he should have a YouTube channel where he just does that.
We'll link that in the description. He actually has been doing some great episodes helping out with what's been going on. Mike's a great...
In fact, he had a post the other day calling out all the non-government organizations that you can contribute to help down there. People who are actually doing...
Yeah, people who are doing things.
I think it was him.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, he did a bunch.
People who are accomplishing things,
people doing,
which is to say not FEMA.
Right, exactly. Not the tax money that we're putting into it, right? And then the last thing is this, and it's the community piece to kind of, I want to retouch that, is you have to have a game plan with the people who are around you, because the next thing that happens once you get yourself safe is now you have to look at longevity. I don't care who you are. If you think that you're going to prep to survive more than 72 plus hours worth of food and water, apart from filtration, it's just not practical. You're not carrying all of that. Because remember this, you really can only guarantee that you'll have what you can carry. And if you're like me, a family of 5 with a dog and 3 little kids, I can't carry more than 3 days worth of food, water, and necessary equipment between my wife and I. That's just not realistic. So then you have to think, how am I going to provide security, shelter, and then how am I going to, secure my loved ones so that I can then go and provide long term? And that's going to require organization and structure and willing participants who are equally committed and that you trust. And so, if you're one of these people living in a basement or living in your little townhome somewhere and you don't know your neighbors, and you're you go to some church 45 minutes to an hour away from where you live and you don't know anyone around you, what are you going to do?
Right. The coffee shop mega church crowd is not probably super.
Unless you're in Lynchburg,
well
then
prepared.
you're okay.
Well,
No,
I think too
dude,
it's
are you
interesting
kidding me?
because it's
Yuppie.
well. Speaking of Lynchburg,
dwellers.
what I was going to say is that the reason I like this conversation is because I think people get pigeonholed into thinking about a specific scenario, and what I think we're suggesting, what I'm specifically suggesting, is just a level of wisdom and preparedness for whatever could possibly happen, and you don't want to be the person that's freaking out and running to the grocery store last minute, because then you just become another one of the herds. And so you guys might remember, not that I'm like trying to bash on my city here, but there was a restaurant in Lynchburg that had an event, a riotous event taking place outside of it. And there were people trying to break into the building, break down the building, throwing rocks at the building. There were cops blocking streets. There were people setting things on fire. Then, out of nowhere, the militia in town, or whoever they are, just randomly from the darkness, like 12 of them, marched into this building, fully armed, fully tacked out, and like they're going to defend this building. So this powder keg is growing and growing, and our house is like 5 blocks from this event.
True.
You remember that? Yeah, that was right there.
Think about
And
that.
I'm getting text messages. People are like, yo, can you hear stuff? What's going on? And per this conversation, it could be Helene, it could be an earthquake, it could be a riotous civil event. I was like, okay.
Mostly peaceful protest? Is that what you're referring to?
A mostly peaceful protest. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I have what I need if the powder keg goes bad and people start going door to door. And like, right, you have to be able to extrapolate. Oh, it's not just going to stay there. What if? You never know. Well, you know, I told my friends, I was like, we're okay. We have an exit strategy. The cars are ready to go if we need to. And, like, we can defend ourselves if somebody with a gun comes to our front door and starts to do something crazy because, you know, whatever was going on. So, like, I like this conversation because, to your point, Hughes, it's like food. Like, you have these tiers, right? If I get to stay in my house, bro, all bets are off. I could last for a while. I got a lot there. Thankfully, no one knows where my address is. And then, like, tier again is, okay, I only get my vehicle. What do I have there? Okay, I only get my bag. What do I have there? And, like, whatever the scenario is, I think it's good to have those tiers of just wisdom and preparedness. And then for me, another, I would say, kingdom component, if the world's not ending and I'm not having to shoot people on the streets, I want to go help. And so I want to be prepared so that I can begin rendering aid. And so another reason I want to be ready to go is so that I can do those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the most surprising things, because this is really the first, like, this was probably the first disaster since COVID that didn't fit inside one of the paradigms of the kinds of disasters that we're prepared for. You know, the difference between a hurricane hits Florida, that's kind of baked in, and how you respond. Yeah.
And Florida wasn't
Whereas
really
this
affected too bad, right? It's more of
it was.
Alabama.
They were, but they were prepared for it. They had a million people
That's the
without
difference,
power,
right?
and then they fixed it within like 2 days because they're like, yes, we do this every year. Like, no big deal.
Like when Georgia got snow, like a less than an inch of snow, and their freeways shut down. Yeah.
And so the surprising thing to me was seeing gas lines and bare supermarket shelves at like the Walmarts and all that stuff in some of these areas of Appalachia. And I was it surprised me because I really thought that after 2020 that the level of preparedness that most people had felt they needed had really gone up. But seeing just the sheer volume of people who didn't have gas, who didn't have food, like basically like two of your top 2 things on the list, I was like, wow, there's really a dearth of the expectation that anything bad is going to happen. And it's surprising. I thought we learned our lesson.
No, because this is the problem. I love this.
Past this.
I love this because this is such a deep problem. This is across the board, and this gets down to your faith too. And this is really important. Humanity's problem is very simple. It's discipline. We forget so fast. And once we've forgotten and we've lost the fear or the anxiety of what is possible, then we move on. And part of it's very helpful because it's what allows us to recover from horrible things, right? Like our ability from like our neuroplasticity, like we're able to rebuild neural pathways and go about our lives and recover from horrible trauma. And I think God designed us that way because human existence in a fallen world is it's not
traumatic.
Always a good time. Yeah, not always a good time. However,
I mean, did people get misgendered?
I know.
Like, how do you supposed to
How do
bounce
you-
back?
How do you recover,
how do you recover from that? Apparently you can't. But here's the thing, like, because we forget and we lack discipline, that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to see it right now. We're doing this episode. People are going to hear it. People are going to go out. They're going to stock up. They're going to buy some things. And then it's just going to drift out of their mind. And then like, oh, well, we'll tap into that. Or, oh, I don't need to bring the shotgun this time. Or, oh, I don't really, need that. I'll worry about it. And then the bad thing happens.
So
and
this
it's
is
just
funny.
like,
The
it's either important or
bifurcation.
it's not.
Like the bifurcation in preparedness between fathers, basically, like that's one category, and then everybody else. Because like I talk to guys at my cigar shop who are like unmarried, don't have kids, or mostly not having kids is I think really the big cut point. Is it's the presumption that like, well, I'm a lone dude, I can figure it out just fine, which is
That's
probably
true.
kind of true. At least
Yeah,
so you're not setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, you can move fast and move light.
But
yeah.
Right.
No.
But seeing how just having your kids in that constant brain loop of what if this, what if that, kind of connects that discipline gap where it's like, what are they going to eat tomorrow? What are they going to eat next year?
Yeah. And
who's going to try and...
For kids, it's important because like I anchor all of the normal stuff that I want to teach my kids, including life lessons about discipline and these other things. I anchor them to these types of scenarios. And when we watch the news, I bring the kids in. I'm like, hey, look, I want to show you something. Do you see this? Can you imagine if that happened? So when dad tells you to stop what you're doing and come here, it could be because I just need you to stop what you're doing. But it could also be that a telephone pole is going to fall on you or, something horrible is going to happen. And in a crisis, there is no room. And I remember as a kid, and I think this is partially why, like, if you grow up with dangers being a part of your life, then you are more aware of it. And it's a blessing. Like nobody wants to live in a dangerous place with with little kids, right? Like I don't want my kids to be exposed to that. But controlled exposure to danger is what allows them to experience that and understand and appreciate why certain behaviors and habits need to be cultivated. And so, going back to our short-term missions episode, this is why going overseas and taking your kids, or like why going camping is important, why teaching your kids how to do fundamental basic things, why reading books.
Okay, you make it sound like that episode was an endorsement of short-term mission trips.
It wasn't, for the record, but the
This
part
is why
about
it was
part about it that I was talking about.
Move on.
But I'm saying that like teaching our children and using those things as examples for how to do that. Like I remember going fishing as a kid. We'd get up super early in the morning, and my dad would walk us. We'd be walking, and we'd come up to a little footbridge, and my brother and I are just bebopping along, crossing over. And he's like, "Whoa!" I'm like, "What?" He was like, "What if there was a tripwire on that bridge?" And I'm like, "I wasn't aware tripwires were things I needed to be concerned about in America, Dad." And he's like, "No, you stop and you look before you cross a bridge to see if there's anything on the bridge."
That's awesome.
Or like I used to love to pick up little pieces of metal, and my dad was like, "Let me tell you a story about picking up things on the side of the road." And this is before he went to Iraq, right? This is just from Panama, like in the old days. He was like, some guy went to pick up a lighter, and connected to the lighter was a grenade, and it blew up. And I was like, okay. Like
your dad sounds like the George Bluth from Arrested Development who hired the guy without the arm.
Yeah, that's exactly.
That's
I don't know what
hilarious.
it is. It's the sound. I like the sound it makes. Like that's the guy who discipled me growing up. So if that makes any explanation, But those kinds of things are. Yeah, your friends might look at you weird, but I guarantee you, my kid's not picking up something that's dangerous on the side of the road. Like,
in a less extreme example, with my childhood, one thing that my dad used to do is, which I'm slowly starting to experiment with my kids, is we would be like on the boardwalk at Rehoboth Beach. Like, we did all the camping, we did all the making fire, so like obviously all that.
yeah.
But
They did the camping on Rehoboth Beach too.
Yeah. One thing I was really, really glad about was that Dad would always do this thing where we would be wandering, like the classic little child not paying attention, and he would fall back. He would never lose sight of us, but he would intentionally hide so that we would have this moment. Every one of us as siblings had to go through this. It was like a coming of age, and he would do it numerous times before we finally got it. And the first time this happens, you lose every ounce of anything that you have. You're like, what's going on? The world is over. You scream, you cry, you bawl. It's just real bad. Now, he's there, right? He didn't leave us. He comes to the rescue. But over time, you develop this ability to learn, okay, now I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to look for Dad. Okay, I didn't look for Dad. Next, I'm going to look for a safe person. Okay, next, I'm going to begin moving. I'm not going to shut down.
Yeah, Nick,
it was just a really cool thing.
That is a really good thing, but I think for a lot of people in this generation, they don't understand fear of the rapture, okay? If you didn't grow up with a sense of innate panic when you looked around and nobody was there, if you did not have this Josh knows what I'm talking about. This immediate moment of panic.
I grew up in California. Nobody was gonna disappear.
Exactly. That's what was scary. So like, when I was in China, if I couldn't find my parents or my brother and sister, I'm like, there's all these Chinese people here, but the rapture could have still happened.
Did it happen?
These people,
These people are going to heaven.
Listen,
oh my gosh!
Like, some of y'all don't know what rapture anxiety is. All right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Man, let me tell you what.
God, we do a whole
episode on that. We should actually. We'll do an episode on the rapture.
Whole episode on that.
But
dude, that would be hilarious.
How scarred is our generation and even our parents by the dispensationalist?
Oh, so bad.
Right.
Thank you, Tim LaHaye.
Eschatology.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
No, listen. When John Chick tracks, geez Louise. When I was growing up, like I try to explain this because I talk about this stuff all the time, and sometimes my wife is like, "Come on, really, Josh?" And I'm like, "Look, I'm sorry, but if you grew up the way I did, like my dad, I told you that's what he did when we were in America. Then we moved to a third world country in the '90s that like hates Christians, like and did illegal missions work. I used to get safety briefings from my father that went something like this: Okay, Josh, so if I get arrested, you need to run, and what do you do next? And I'm like, I go see so and so. He's like, okay, and if they're not there, I go see so and so. And I'm like, and if they're not there, then I try to get myself to the American embassy. Where's the closest American embassy? It's in this town, hundreds of miles away.
So you had like an actual trade.
How are you going to get across the border? How are you going to get? What country are you going to go to? Are you just going to go into the police? I'm not going to the police because I'm in China, right? Like, what are you going to do? Like, and so trying to teach like that, like having to memorize all my passport number and all this at a young age, like having to, learning how to like keep money. Like I keep money under the insole of my shoe in case like. So this is that's a whole nother side of this that we could talk about. But that level of like.
Now we know where you keep your stats.
I'm here for it.
I am. If you come and take my shoe, I got
use
$100
shoes
there,
off.
But I always have $100. I always got $100 on me. So, but
have you checked it recently though?
I know. Sometimes I wonder if my kids figured that
Here's
out.
what's gonna happen. Hey, Chaplain Hughes, let me see your shoe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you guys have the shoes with a little zipper pocket on the tongue?
No,
I never had that.
No.
Okay.
But
I thought that was
not
so
for
cool.
drugs or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so another thing to think about is this, like when you think about even like international travel and other things like that, or if you live in a city, this is a good one. When I lived in cities, I used to keep money and like a photocopy of my passport in, safety deposit boxes or in like a gym that I would go to or places that I could keep. It's stuff that you might see in movies, but it's stuff that makes sense because you may not be able to get back to your house. Your house might be on fire. Like where, if you're in a foreign country, where are you keeping a second set of documents? Do you leave them with a friend? Do you have a friend at a coffee shop where you can stash something under, hey, can you keep duct tape this up under the cash register or something for me? Like,
speaking of stashes, would you guys recommend having a location out in the woods somewhere with a cache of supplies?
100%.
Yeah.
If you have the means and the ability to do so, yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Shovel and a tote.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean,
50-gallon food
for
drum.
sure.
You can get them cheap. But even if it's...
Well, I think...
Oh, go ahead.
I love the specifics, and I want to stay on the specifics, but I think like the 30,000-foot view is like situational awareness. You might be in China, in a third world country, or in a different... I've been to Moldova when they were burning down the parliament, and I was like, all right, which border? You know, like I didn't have a similar upbringing as Hughes, but I kind of did. But situational awareness looks different, right? When I go to my buddy's house in Estes Park, Colorado, I'm processing, okay, if there's a forest fire, do we own a chainsaw? Where's our route of escape? Like how, like, you know, not like it takes 20 minutes of my mental capacity for a long weekend that I'm there, but situational awareness is, I think, really the main thing here. With Helene,
well, and here's your litmus test.
How many people had situational awareness for, okay, you get the flash flood alert. Okay, where's the highest ground? Okay, what food can we at least bring with us? Do we own a generator? We're going to lose electricity for a while. Generators are cheap these days. A little solar generator, $300? Like, there's no reason
on that
you're
note,
going to own one of those.
On that note, I do have a show and tell, because I do think that
I'm sure you do.
I do think that this is one thing that is new that a lot of people don't have. But like, there's two things that I could say I would own in America that I know, but that a lot of people don't think about. A chainsaw is one. Everybody thinks about guns. Everybody thinks about other stuff, but a chainsaw is really really important thing to have. And then one of these. So we're not sponsored by SpaceX, but SpaceX working for it.
Hey, Elon, if you want to come,
we can talk about why this is important too. But like, this is a new deal. Some of you may not have seen this. You may have heard of Starlink, but this is the Starlink Mini. All right. Now, in America, it's a little bit more expensive. What was it in the U.S., Tim?
Oh,
600.
It's like $600. All right. And some of you are like, oh, it's a lot of money. And it is. But, you know, show me a good gun. Show me a good gun worth having that costs less than that. And apart from the Glock 19, which probably does cost $600
now. On the next episode of the Reverse
now.
Ramby, spend everything.
Yeah. But check this out.
That should be your segment of this show. Spend everything.
That's right.
Yes.
This little
Have
device.
some extra money lying around.
Yeah. This little device can run for 6 hours on a battery pack like this.
Do you guys remember us talking about how Josh sells his friends on everything, and that's why we don't have any money?
Don't you own a Tacoma for that reason?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're welcome.
That's exactly
Don't you
why I
own a Z71 for that reason? But my point is with this is one of the big things that we saw in Helene specifically was the lack of ability to communicate. People were traveling to the places they could get cell phone service. And what a lot of people don't realize is that when service goes down or when it's limited to 1 or 2 towers, you might have 4 or 5 bars, but the tower's overloaded. So you don't actually you won't actually get data usage. And the reason I'm showing this is because I don't think people understand how big of a deal this is. This is battery powered, low voltage usage, satellite communications at up to like 200 and something megabits per second, which is enough for you to play Call of Duty fast. So like you, your family,
priorities,
multiple people, and your ability to have communications anywhere in the world as long as SpaceX is still a company, because it's not locally connected.
Okay. Caveat with a feature request, though.
Yes.
If you don't have active service on this thing and you don't have a secondary way of accessing the internet to activate it, you can't activate the service using the device.
Right, that is true.
And to me, is a significant flaw in its preparedness utility.
Get it together, SpaceX.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not saying they don't have it together. We have space internet. I can appreciate that.
Elon can only do so much.
I need to be able to open this thing up when all other communications are down.
Right. Yes.
Activate it from there with Bitcoin.
Yes.
Right? Because like Bank of America, they're not going to be able to process a payment in that.
So
that's crazy. Obviously, it's not like you would just log into Bank of America.
No,
and
not a
see
luxury.
Your
This is not a luxury.
balance.
This is a luxury preparedness device.
No, not at all.
And let me just say, you should own a generator before you own a SpaceX.
What are you
Starlink.
talking about?
Okay,
First of all,
Nick, hold on, Nick.
no, pause. How are you? First of all, one, I can put that in my backpack. No, it's not a luxury.
Hold on. It is a luxury because in none of my scenarios do I need internet communication.
How are you said?
And
do you need communication at all?
Internet communication is a luxury in that, okay, we have the game plan. Like, I don't even want to mess with internet communication until I'm stabilized, until I've gotten something
What about
built
communication
up,
at all?
until I'm ready to surf the web. I have walkie-talkies if I need to distribute that. I have...
Walkie-talkies work on line of sight. Like, that's what I'm saying. This costs as much as...
First of all, let's not let natural disasters and lag ruin our top finish Call of Duty score. Okay,
that's what I'm saying. Like, what's
priority?
The web
This is why we need.
Nick, let me respond to that. All right. First of all, I would agree with you that if you are thinking about when I say internet, look, what you use the internet for on a daily basis is what comes to your mind, right? What I'm saying is, in that area, if the person who has internet to let you know that you're alive, to send message, because remember, all your text messages, like, it's not just surfing the web, it's the ability to reach the outside world or to reach anywhere in the world, not just on a local closed radio network. Or
but $49 CB radio
don't
versus
do that.
a $600
Starlink. No guarantee. It's $600. You would buy a $600 gun and say that's or $600 chainsaw or a $600 generator. I'm saying you can have.
I also have to start up a subscription.
To
it sounds like
on
too.
The planet with this.
It's a subscription, isn't it?
You don't have to pay the subscription unless you're using it. So what I'm saying is like you can pay for it.
So you're telling me I can buy this $600 device and never use it until the world ends, at which point I can press a button and all of a sudden have a subscription and it'll work?
And here you've seen in live action why we all can't afford our groceries because of being friends with Josh.
I am on Josh's side on this one, except that
I
because
agree.
I did just get this thing, it is low on the priority list.
Spend the money.
Well, I mean, how many things are you solving?
What I'm talking about.
How many things are you solving with this, though? Like in the checkbox list, I see what kind of. Let me play devil's advocate. Well, not devil's advocate. Let me play Nick's advocate. In the priority of things of basic survivals checkbox, what are the priorities first?
Food,
is communication to top on your list?
Food, water, shelter, communication. That's it. Those 4.
Yeah, but the communication is like, again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I love Starlink, and I would love to have enough money to own one. But like, if I'm separated from my wife, but I have my Starlink $600 briefcase in my truck, she doesn't have communication. I've not gained anything unless somehow I'm able to tap into her cell phone with my Starlink.
Okay, so
it's complicated.
Here's
fast.
a pitch.
Follow me here.
Then, are you guys familiar with?
This is my point.
I'm kidding. Go ahead, Tim.
My God.
What were you
Go
gonna say?
ahead, Tim.
See, that's the thing. You can't even parody yourself. We all believe that's
I know.
the thing you would actually say.
I have 2 Starlinks.
You
What do
need
you mean
home
you say I
Starlink,
have
and then
2
you
of
need
them?
car Starlink and other car Starlink.
That's so true.
So let me point this
See,
out.
you can't even
I
argue
know,
against
and then
that.
I'm not arguing, but here's
How
what I'm
many
saying.
And then
Starlinks is
if
too
you
many?
have-
Put a number on
if
it.
you
How
have-
many
All
is
right,
too many?
listen. So
If you have more than one, you become a Starlink Commodore.
All right, so let me put it right.
Oh my gosh.
So here's part of the thing I want to point out with this is that it's also about what you use it for. So for me, I'm not thinking about this just for preparedness. I use this every day as for work.
Yes,
Right?
obviously,
So it's an
it makes
obvious
sense then.
and if you camp or you do things or you live somewhere with remote where you don't always get cell phone service,
Yes.
then my point
Agreed.
is you may not have thought about this.
Agreed.
Right? What I'm saying is that it's a big deal that personal man portable, cannot emphasize this enough, like realistically man portable satellite network connection that can run off of 30 watts of solar alone is
Now, if you're having a conversation
unbelievable.
with me about how we should pivot from the router I have at home, and there's a cost equivalent to buying this instead, and but I can bug out with my internet, I could be like, okay, yeah, you might convince me to make that expense. But it's like, I'm already paying for internet at my house.
Yeah, well,
but
that's
if this
actually a
can
good point.
replace that, that's a better argument.
Well, I mean, for a lot of people, but yeah, I mean, say for you, for like if you're not a power user, like If you want gigabit, you're not using Starlink. But I here in Germany, like I'm running on less than 300 megabits a second, so I have Starlink at home, and I have this. So yeah, I can literally bug out with my internet, which I think is a big deal. Yeah, I think that's what I'm getting at, is that like what we saw in Helene and what a lot of the talking points has been how big communications has been a problem there, because people weren't able to, like, we're in America, people in America expect to always be able to use their cell phones. We're not in a third world country. And so like that's what I'm getting at, is like how, you can't always guarantee that you're going to maintain that cellular connection.
Yeah. So on that point, though, there is a device, and I got a few of them for this exact reason. I just completely forgot about them, because that's what you do when you like preparing for things. You have contingencies, and then you forget about them. For about $20, you can get LoRa communication modules.
They're great.
That have up to maybe 5 miles of range, realistically under ideal circumstances.
Line of sight.
A couple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, not strictly line of sight.
Yeah, if you've got a network of them, you can make it. Yeah.
No, even point to point. Like, they're going to go through walls and some barriers. They do not have to be.
Yeah, they don't have
strictly
to be
line of sight.
Purely right, but it does degrade it. Yeah.
So, yeah, same as any radio, but they're cheap. You can plug them into your phone, and then you can communicate point to point with anybody else who has one. With the, you can write your own stuff, but using the Meshtastic platform, and you could just basically do text messaging back and forth.
Super handy piece of kit. Highly recommend people.
Yeah, if you, and then they're cheap enough. You could throw one in each car, have one at home, whatever, and they'll just
I've never heard of this device.
It's very cool.
Means that we should.
We'll send you the link. While he's looking that up, the other thing I want to point out that exists now that's cheap that everyone should have, not just for the crazy natural disaster where you have to move, is 3D printer. 3D printing.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm serious. 3D printing is.
I know. There's
super cheap.
There's no end to it.
It's super cheap, and
Are you holding a 3D printed knife right now?
Look at this.
Dude, if people are down to the 3D printer item on the prep list, they don't need to listen to this conversation.
Oh, no. Yes, agreed. Anyway,
it's a toy for the record.
It's a toy. Of the
I'm
Telling God About This podcast.
Hold on. We're not done yet. So my point is the 3D printer thing. I do want to walk through this real quick because this is actually pretty cool. So you can have.
It has nothing to do with preparedness.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. What are you going to do when you break? What are you going to like? I can 3D print. I can stockpile spools of filament. Right?
I love you. I just want you to know.
I know that. But listen, spools of filament. Let me show you.
Oh my gosh. This is not a pitch for 3D printers. Move on.
No.
This is Josh's flavor of the week.
This is legit.
Oh my goodness. You're still
like,
leave a comment. Leave a comment if you think 3D printers will be necessary in a prepared situation.
Okay. Now I'm gonna say. Now we're gonna have to have this conversation because she doth protest too much. Look, you can store filament in a vacuum sealed. Yeah. Store them for a long time, and what's cool about it is you can store STL files, which are the 3D printable files. You can store useful things. For instance, you can make knives, you can make brackets, you can make bowls, cups, all sorts of splints.
Bowls necessary when the world ends.
Splints for arm braces, other medical supplies like eye covers.
Sticks for arm braces.
You can do that too, but I'm saying we have technology now that is cheap, that operates off-grid, that is relative, and it's small. It's not something you're going to take with you.
Can I 3D print a Starlink?
No.
That'd be helpful.
That would be cool. But you can 3D print, protractors for orienteering. You can 3D print, all kinds of stuff that's useful.
If you don't know how to fabricate a right angle with sticks and string, then I don't.
You're not going
to.
Well, I'll tell you this: if you've tried orienteering on a map with sticks and string and a map, it's not quite as precise as if you have the other stuff. But that's another thing we can talk about.
Since we're out in left field, my favorite movie to watch right now is World War Z.
I just watched it because of you again recently.
I love it so much, and every time I watch it with Brittany, she's like, "This is the movie you have watched the most in our entire marriage." But she'll sit through it with me every time. And the last and most recent viewing of World War Z, she's like, "I I just want to die. I don't even want to live through this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, honey, you have children now. You don't have this option.
That's right.
You also don't have to do it alone.
Right.
Like the whole point is like that she's got the Nick buffer layer between herself and you know, harsh reality to whatever extent that can be managed. But I like the way you do like the little head bob when you're impersonating her.
Yeah,
that's so funny. She's so funny. Yeah. But anyway, we've been working on our preparedness for her, where it's like, yeah, she like, I mean, it's kind of funny, but like there was a situation the other day where one of the kiddos had blood, and when Brittany sees blood, it wasn't bad, like the kid was fine, but when Brittany sees blood, she just kind of like her brain shuts down, and like mine does not. I get into like game mode.
Right.
I'm like, okay, do we need to triage? Do we need to stitch? How can we cauterize if we need to cauterize? How can we get this thing to clot? How bad is it?
Kid skins their knee and you're coming at him with a hot poker.
Well, no, this was a bloody lip. It could have been bigger, but no, skinned the knee, obviously. No, and so in that moment, it was funny because afterwards we were debriefing, and Brittany was like, "How do you respond this way?" And I was like, "Honey, you just have to." Well, one, it's how God made me, but two, it's like you just have to pivot to triage mode, and you have to, on some level, you have to teach yourself to do that. You can't just hope it happens.
That's actually a really good point.
And I think that's important.
People don't understand this, too. Like, it is something you need to know about yourself, and I do think it's what we've lost. We're going to do a whole episode on rites of passage one day, so we'll talk about this.
Oh, that'll be good.
But this is one of the reasons why rites of passage are important, because I'm here to tell you that not everybody has the same response to chaos, like if you haven't figured that out. And you might think that you're one of these people that will respond well, and you won't. And the only way to know if you are that person is to have been in that situation. And so and I'll tell you when you don't want to see that or figure that out, when it's important, right? Mm-hmm. Like you want to have that experience in as controlled an environment as possible. And so like, you know, I loved it in seminary, preparing for the chaplaincy. One of the really smart things they did for the chaplains was they brought us into the medical school to the cadaver lab, and they brought us in with the doctors to not just to see, but to handle dead human remains that were in pieces, not even fully intact bodies. So intact bodies and pieces, right? So, you know, you're handling, you know, a mangled leg or an arm or something like this, right? And the reason for that is because the doctors understand this. That's why they go through these things, is that you are going to have a physiological response to these things when your body's in high stress, and you don't know how you're going to react until you've been in that situation. And so it really helps, you know, the stress inoculation factor is really good. So rites of passage are good for that. But if you've made it this far in your life and you've never been tested, then, you know, there are ways to solve that problem too. But yeah, that's a whole other episode for another time. But yeah, so if you know, hey, listen.
Any other products you wanted to
No, but we'll talk more about the 3D printing thing. But the big takeaway here is that God has given us, especially I want to speak to the men and women and families, but like we're accountable, especially for the dads and the husbands and the mothers too. Like you're accountable, and God has given us something that we're supposed to manage and steward, and part of that is being prepared. And does it cause stress and anxiety? Yes. There's a healthy level of that, and there's an unhealthy level of that. And God tells us that we're not supposed to live with the spirit of fear and anxiety. We're supposed to trust him, but we're also supposed to do what is within our power to prepare and to think and to do those things. And so, when we see these things, not only do we grieve and we hate it for them and it breaks our hearts, but it should also do the human thing, which is to ask yourself, what would I do in that situation myself? And so hopefully you took away some good idea from this, or maybe at least it was entertaining for you. But until next time, please like and subscribe. And if you haven't forgotten as well, we're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And so, you know, if you want to just listen online instead of watching on YouTube, by all means, hit us up on that. There's no ads on that platform, so should be good to go. But anyway,
and isn't that whole verse, the Lord did not give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, of love, and of self-control, or self-discipline. So Situational awareness matters, people.
That's right.
It's been a great episode. See you guys on the other side.